across WA. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Payman. We'll now move to question time. Senator McGrath.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Farrell. Can the Minister name anywhere in Australia where power prices have been reduced since you've been in government?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank Senator McGrath for his question. Look, I have to say I don't follow power prices as closely to be able to answer the question, and I'm not sure that there's any person in this chamber who is so closely watches power prices to be able to give that answer. But what I can say is this, Senator McGrath, and I did say something similar yesterday, that it's the objective of the Albanese government to put downward pressure on power prices so that Australian consumers, householders, but also Australian businesses don't have to pay the high electricity prices that have resulted from your years and years and years of neglect in this space. We want Australian consumers, we want Australian businesses to be paying less for their power prices. And so the things that we've done, the caps that we've done, it wasn't easy. Wasn't easy to get. Well, firstly, it wasn't easy to make that decision. It wasn't easy to get it through this parliament because your party opposed all of those changes that might have put downward pressure on electricity prices. So I think it's a little bit rich, you coming into this question time asking these questions when we're in a situation as a result of your neglect.
Thank you, Senator Farrell. Your time for answering that question has expired. Senator McGrath, first supplementary.
Thank you. Can the Minister identify a single mortgage holder who has seen their interest rate go down in the past 10 months?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. President, and thank Senator McGrath for his question. Look, I have great sympathy for mortgage holders for the situation in which they find themselves and the repeated increases in interest rates. But there's a whole
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe, I was going to bring it to the chamber's attention. I was just going to let this set of questions go.
Taking photos, that's
yes.
all. Thank you.
I remind all there apparently is a senator taking photos. We all know that's inappropriate. I just remind the chamber to not do that. And I expect Senator Thorpe. I am responding. I expect the government will speak to the senator concerned. Minister Farrell, please continue.
All right. So where was I? Okay. So we all know the reasons why there's pressure on interest rates in this country, and we're not unique in that regard because there's pressure on interest rates going up right around the world. But again, this government is trying to do things to reduce cost of living.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McGrath, second supplementary.
Can the Minister identify a single person whose grocery bill is lower today than when you came into government?
Thank you, Senator McGrath. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator McGrath for his question. Well, again, I can't say that I know the grocery price of every retail store in the country, and therefore what the consumers themselves choose to buy. I do know that as a matter of practice, having some experience in the retail industry and a former occupation, that one thing people do when prices start to rise is they change the particular products that they purchase. But again, it's the purpose. It's the purpose of this. It's the purpose of this government to try and put downward pressure on the cost of living, and we're doing that. We're doing that in terms of things like childcare. We're doing that.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Walsh.
President, my question is to the Minister for Finance and the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Today, new homelessness data has been released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which shows that over 122,000 people were homeless on census night. Can the Minister outline the practical measures the Albanese Labor government is taking to address cost of living pressures for people, particularly those experiencing housing stress or homelessness?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Walsh for her question. The Albanese government wants every Australian to have the security of having a roof over their head. We know that too many Australians are being hit by growing rents and too many Australians are struggling to buy a home. It's unacceptable that it's getting more and more expensive to have a safe and secure home, and sadly, as we've found out today, as Senator Walsh alluded to in her question, far too many Australians are facing homelessness. As reported today on census night, nearly 123,000 Australians were homeless. This is unacceptable. We have also seen figures today that show in the 5 years to 2021, under the former government's watch, the number of homeless people grew each night by 6,000. This is what we need to improve. This is why we need to improve access to affordable and safe homes for all Australians. We were elected with a plan to clean up the mess that was left behind and help tackle the cost of accessing a home. Fundamental to our plan is increasing the supply of new housing. Australians do not have enough supply of new housing. The $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund will be the largest boost to social and affordable homes in a decade. The 30,000 homes the fund will deliver are one part of the Albanese government's ambitious housing agenda, which also includes broadening the National Housing Infrastructure Facility, the Housing Accord, the $1.6 billion National Housing and Homelessness Agreement, the Interim National Housing Supply and Affordability Council, a new National Housing and Homelessness Plan, the Help to Buy scheme and the Regional First Home Buyer Guarantee. The government is going to continue to push and argue in this chamber to have the passage of that important piece of legislation so that we can put in place the fund that will provide an ongoing source of investment into the social and affordable housing sector.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Walsh, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, how will the Albanese Labor government's Housing Australia Future Fund help to support people with acute housing needs?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Walsh. The Housing Australia Future Fund will provide regular and reliable capital funds to build new social and affordable homes across Australia in perpetuity. As we've heard in the Senate hearing last week from experts, community housing providers, homelessness services and academics, this is urgently needed. National Shelter, the peak body that so many of us deal with on these matters, called it the most critical housing legislation to be brought forward for the past 10 years. In its first 5 years, this fund will be investing in building 20,000 social housing properties, with 4,000 properties for women and children fleeing domestic violence and older women who are at risk of homelessness, $100 million for crisis and transitional housing for women and children, and $30 million to build more housing for veterans who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. I hope that everyone in the Senate will consider these statistics when that legislation comes for a vote over this sitting fortnight.
Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
Minister, why is it so important that the Housing Australia Future Fund is delivered?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Walsh for the question and for her interest in the issue of social and affordable housing in Australia. It's so important that this fund is delivered. It is the first fund of its kind which would provide an ongoing revenue stream into the social and affordable housing sector. The first time that we would have set something up via legislation to make investments, and this is over and above the traditional areas of the Commonwealth investment through our national partnerships with the states and territories, but it's in recognition that there is not enough supply, and there is not enough supply of housing going into the areas where it's needed the most, in First Nations communities, for women, for veterans, for especially single older women who have no retirement savings and who might be living on their own. This is the area that we need to make these investments, and that is why this piece of legislation is so important, and that is why the opposition should change their position on this bill.
Senator Chandler.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Farrell. Yesterday during question time, the Minister for Finance said, "The fact is, Stage 3 tax cuts have been legislated by this chamber. They are in place. Stage 3 will commence in July next year. The policy we took to the election was that those tax cuts remain, and our position has not changed." That is what I was saying yesterday. That continues to be our position. Minister, does Mr Albanese, the Prime Minister, remain committed to implementing the Stage 3 tax cuts?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister Farrell.
Thanks.
I thought the answer was yes, John. You could just say yes.
Order.
As much, thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Chandler. And with all due respect to Senator Birmingham, I am quite capable of answering my own questions and don't need his. Don't need.
Order.
Don't need.
Order. Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Minister Farrell. Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Thank you. Order on my left. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you for that protection. Look, I'm not sure. I find it difficult to understand why the coalition. This is the second question today that you've asked, basically asking the same question that you answered yesterday. And would you be surprised? Would you be surprised, Senator? Would you be surprised, Senator Chandler, if the Prime Minister, who's doing a wonderful job, had any different view about tax cuts than the Finance Minister, who's doing just an amazing job, given the mess that you left her to. Yes, I'd forgotten about that. Yes. At least we have a Finance Minister who is trusted by his. They trust him too. They trust him too. They trust him too, Senator Cash. Senator
Cash, you've got a senator on her feet. Senator Chandler.
Thank you, President. The point of order was relevance. It was a very specific question, and the minister has been going for 93 seconds now. It does require just a one-word answer, if you could provide it.
The minister is being relevant. Thank you, Senator Chandler. Please continue, Minister Farrell.
Well, can I say to Senator? Thank you, President. Can I say to Senator Chandler? If you want to answer my questions, then there's no point you asking the questions to me. You might as well answer them yourself. But
order.
But look. You've asked the same question to me that you asked to Senator Gallagher
Thank
yesterday.
you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Chandler, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Yesterday in question time, the Minister for Finance also said our position on tax cuts hasn't changed, but we are in the position of having to repair a budget. Can the Prime Minister guarantee that his government's policy in relation to Stage 3 tax cuts will not change in the future?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Chandler, for your first supplementary question. Well, again, you've got the answer, because the Finance Minister, who's in charge of this area, answered the question yesterday. But look, can I expand? You've referred to the issues that Senator Gallagher raised yesterday. Can I expand on the financial mess that we discovered when we came to this country. And can I just report on one fact that puts this into perspective? When Labor lost power in 2013, our national debt was $300 billion. When we came to power, almost 12 months ago, that figure had blown out to $1 trillion.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Chandler, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, why can't you be honest with the Australian people and admit now that you won't be implementing the Stage 3 tax cuts?
Order on my right. Minister Farrell.
Thanks, President, and again thank Senator Chandler for her question. Well, honesty, hey? We're talking about honesty. Why didn't the former Prime Minister of this country tell us that he replaced 5 ministers of the former government? Five, maybe even 6. I think we've discovered it might even be 6. And you dare to talk about honesty. Now, what Prime Minister Albanese says he does. So when he said he was going to put downward pressure on...
Order. Senator Farrell. Order on my left. Your leader is on his feet. Order. Senator Birmingham.
President, I'm afraid Senator Farrell's misleading the chamber, because if the Prime Minister says what he does, where are the $275 tax cuts?
Senator Birmingham, thank you. Please continue, Minister Farrell.
I reject that point of order.
He didn't even get to the point of order stage, Minister. Please continue.
I'm not sure why they're all so happy today. What are you happy about?
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Waters.
My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister. Responding to the latest IPCC synthesis report yesterday, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said no new coal, oil or gas and no expansions of existing coal, oil or gas reserves. Why does Labor want to open the 116 new coal and gas projects in the pipeline?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Waters for her question. The Australian government, of course, welcomes the IPCC report, and I think even you, Senator Waters, would acknowledge that there's been a significant change in terms of the issues of climate change, which, of course, the IPCC were dealing with in their report between our government and the former government, and in particular, the greater commitments that we have made as a government to addressing the issues of climate change and starting the process of increasing the speed at which our economy is decarbonised. Now, that, unfortunately, it's not an easy thing to do. You can't snap your fingers like that and suddenly go from a fossil fuel-supported economy to a renewable economy. You just can't do it. You can't do it. And I wish you could. I wish you could do that by flicking my fingers, but we can't do it. So this government is moving down the path of decarbonisation, but we're doing it in a sensible way. Firstly, trying to bring the community with us, and I think we're doing that. We brought them with us. Well, they voted for us at the last election, Senator McKim. They voted for us. They voted for us. You don't like it. They voted for us as a government. They voted for our policies, not your policies. And they certainly didn't vote for your policies.
Minister Farrell, the time for answering has expired. Senator Waters, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. The government has called for budget restraint. The UN Secretary-General and the International Energy Agency have both called for cuts to public subsidies for fossil fuels, which incidentally would save your budget $11 billion every year. Will the government end fossil fuel subsidies to help tackle the economic and climate crises?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Walters for her question. The issue of transition, which is what we're talking about here, transition from a fossil fuel economy to a renewable economy, is not. It's not an easy transition. It's easy to say. It's easy to talk about.
Senator Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Waters.
Thanks, President. I specifically asked about fossil fuel subsidies and when you're going to axe the $11 billion a year you give in cheap diesel and accelerated depreciation to fossil fuel companies.
Thank you, Senator Waters. I'll remind Senator Farrell of the question. So, Senator Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Walters for her intervention there. As I was saying, if there was an easy way to solve this problem, like simply abolishing the sorts of...
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham.
Help Senator Farrell. Senator Watt has already ruled this change out being in the budget.
Senator Birmingham, please, that's not a point of order. Minister Farrell, please continue.
Thank you, President. Look.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Your time has expired. Order. Senator Waters, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. Will the Labor Party return the $960,000 it received in donations from the fossil fuel sector just in the last financial year so that you can start making policy decisions based on science?
Senator Watt. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And the short answer is no. We're not going to return those donations any more than you've returned donations from companies that donate to the Greens, who also have investments in fossil fuel. I understand your organisation has refused to return those. Nor do you return, donations from companies engaged in gambling. But can I say this to you, Senator Waters?
Minister Farrell, please resume your. Minister Farrell, please. Senator Watt, I have a senator on his feet. Senator Shoebridge. Senator Shoebridge, resume your seat. Resume your seat. Senator Shoebridge. Order. If you rise to your feet during question time, it is to call a point of order, not to make a statement. You can make statements at other times in this place. Minister Farrell, please continue.
President, obviously we touched a nerve there, and the Greens are embarrassed about their donations. But can I say this to the Greens and to the coalition? We do need to reform the donation regime in this country.
Thank you, Minister.
And
the time for answering has expired. Senator Grogan.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Skills and Training, Senator Watt. The Albanese government has a clear agenda to create the jobs of the future by taking advantage of the transition to renewable energy and investing in skills and training. How is the government's commitment to action on climate change supporting the jobs and skills of the future?
Senator Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Grogan, who of course has a very long history in supporting all of these issues, even before she arrived in this place. Right now, this parliament is faced with a very simple choice. For the first time in a decade, we can seize the opportunity to reduce emissions from Australia's big emitters, or we can squander that opportunity yet again. Reforms to the safeguard mechanism are crucial to meeting our legislated emissions reduction target, the target that most honourable senators voted for in this place last year. When this parliament voted for a 43% emissions reductions target for our country, the very senators who argued for a higher target are now the ones who would have it be even lower. Without the changes that the safeguard mechanism involves, our nation is looking at a 35% emissions reductions target by 2030, 8% lower than what was legislated by this parliament last year. And those honourable senators who said the target should be higher now have a choice to make, because if they vote against these reforms, they are voting for a lower outcome than what was legislated just last year. Those senators would be voting against a 43% emissions reduction target and against net zero by 2050. We all have the opportunity here to take 205 million tonnes of carbon out of the air by 2030, the equivalent of 2/3 of the cars on Australia's roads. We have the chance to drive change among the 215 biggest emitters in the country, who represent 28% of Australia's overall emissions. Now, yesterday's IPCC report, which has been cited in here today, showed that this decade is the critical decade for action, the critical decade to make an urgent, rapid and far-reaching transformation across our economy, and that's exactly why all senators should vote for the changes we're proposing for the safeguards mechanism.
Senator Grogan, first supplementary.
Thank you, Senator Watt. That was a wise advice that you've given there. Given the jobs and skills of the future depend on industry and business having certainty and confidence, can the minister outline how a predictable trajectory for emissions reduction will give that certainty and confidence?
Minister Watt.
Thanks again, Senator Grogan. The government's safeguard mechanism reforms that all senators will have the opportunity to vote on in the next couple of weeks are the next step to ensure that Australian industry remains competitive in a decarbonising global economy while reducing their emissions. What this means for Australians is jobs, clean, green and renewable jobs of the future, jobs in green steel manufacturing, green hydrogen, offshore wind and other associated industries. If we get the policy settings right for business to decarbonise, we will achieve this ambition. And that's why the Business Council of Australia, the Australian Industry Group and the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry support these reforms, and 80% of facilities are already covered by corporate net zero commitments. Interesting that the parties who say that they support big business aren't backing in those business groups on this point. Business knows that reducing emissions is essential to their long-term competitiveness in a global net zero economy, and that's why they're supporting the safeguards mechanism.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Senator Watt, are there any threats to delivering the skills, training and jobs of the future?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Grogan. And unfortunately, there are a range of threats, and not always from the sources that you would expect. The truth is that Australia is starting way behind where we should, largely as a result of the Greens voting with the Liberals and Nationals against the CPRS in 2009, and I'd be pretty embarrassed about that too. And of course, it's also due to a decade of inaction from those on the other side. And now the Greens are faced with the same choice 14 years later. And I say to the Green senators, do you really want to find yourselves sitting next to Senator Rennick, Senator Antic, Senator Canavan, Senator Hanson, Senator Roberts and all of those other people who say that climate change isn't real? Do you really want to be sitting next to them when this comes to a vote in the next fortnight? Or will you be on the right side of history? Will you listen to the appeals of groups like the Carbon Market Institute, the Investor Group on Climate Change, the Australian Conservation Foundation and the Climate Council, who all say that this whole Senate should back the safeguard mechanism?
Your time has expired. Order. I remind you, Senator Watt, to please direct your comments and answers to the chair. Senator Roberts.
My question to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher, follows calls from concerned constituents and relates to Labor's bank deposits guarantee element of the financial claims scheme. Minister, can you assure constituents and assure the Senate that in the event of a banking failure, every cent in every Australian's bank accounts will be guaranteed under the Deposit Guarantee Scheme?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I do welcome the opportunity to talk to the Senate about the strength of our banking system, and because I think it is an important issue to reassure Australians, indeed, that we have a very strong, well-regulated, well-led, well-capitalised, with good liquidity banking system. I would also say, so I think that should provide reassurance to the Australian people about the system that we have in place. It's been strengthened considerably in the years since the GFC and since the Banking Royal Commission, and it's obviously a vital and important sector for the overall functioning of our economy. I would also say that the Treasurer and the Assistant Treasurer meet regularly and are getting updates regularly on the global situation, what we've been seeing happening overseas, including meeting with the regulators of our system to get up-to-date advice. And, well,
oh, sorry, Minister Gallagher. Senator Roberts.
I ask specifically for the minister to guarantee that, to assure constituents that in the event of a banking failure, every cent in every Australian's bank accounts will be guaranteed. I'm not interested in overseas. Just want to know if every cent.
Senator Roberts, I do believe the minister is being relevant to your question. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and thank you, President, and for thank you, Senator Roberts. I mean, I only briefly went overseas. I was giving that as additional reassurance. The initial part of my remarks, my answer was about the strength of the Australian banking system, which is where Australians have their deposits and have their money. And I was providing that reassurance that Senator Roberts was seeking about the strength of the banking system and the fact that we are taking advice daily. In fact, the Treasurer and the Assistant Treasurer are getting briefings regularly about the situation overseas, because that directly links to your question, which is some of the concerns that we've seen in banks overseas. I mean, we are connected in a global world, and so we do keep an eye on that in order to keep an eye on what's happening in Australia.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
I note that twice the minister has not assured people that every cent in every Australian's bank accounts will be guaranteed. So, Minister, what is the total figure for depositors' funds in Australia? And of that, what percentage does the Deposit Guarantee Scheme actually guarantee?
Minister.
Thank you. On that, I don't have those details front of mind or actually in my papers, so I will come back to the Senator and the Senate with an update. If I can do that during question time, I will. But I would say that when we have faced challenges in the banking system in Australia, which we are not facing now, the government, and I would presume this would have been on either side of the political fence, would act quickly to respond to any concerns that we saw in the banking system, which goes to your question about guaranteeing deposits. But we are not in that situation, and that is why my answer to your original question was about the strength of the banking system here and the fact that we are keeping close watch on what's happening internationally in case there are any impacts that come our way from it.
Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Since 2008, the Deposit Guarantee Scheme has been capped at $20 billion per bank and $80 billion total. Minister, do you have $80 billion sitting there ready to go? And if not, how much is immediately accessible to the scheme, and how long will it take for the full guarantee amount to be available?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister.
Thank you. Well, in the event that we needed to respond, I can guarantee that the government would move quickly to ensure the stability and security of Australia's banking system. But that is not the situation we are in. The regulators advise us that the banks are well capitalised with good liquidity, they're well led, they're profitable. They are engaged with regulators all the time, and the government remains absolutely aware to the issues overseas and engaged with all of those, the banking system, the regulators and other stakeholders to ensure that remains the case. And if there was any concerns, the government would respond quickly.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cadell.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Farrell. Earlier this week, the Prime Minister said it has been a good 10-month period because what we've been doing is going through fulfilling the election commitments we made at the election. Meanwhile, families in New South Wales, including the parents of St Philip's College up above us, are facing double-digit in energy costs. Where is the commitment to the $275 energy price card that you get?
Senator Farrell. Order. 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 Order across the chamber. Senator Watt. Senator Gallagher. Order across the chamber. Minister Farrell.
I'd stop talking, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you.
How are you, Marcus?
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Watt, I've called you several times. Interjections across the chamber are disorderly. Minister Farrell.
Thank you. Thank you, President, and thank Senator Cadell for his question, and welcome all of those people up there who are taking an interest in democracy. They're not frightened of me. Even you're not frightened of me. But getting back to the question at hand, of course, the Prime Minister is deeply concerned about cost of living issues that face everyday Australians. And what's he doing about it? Well, of course, he's supported the increase in the minimum wage and a pay rise for aged care workers, made childcare cheaper in this country, pushing down the price of medicine, creating 180,000 new fee-free trade places to make up for all of those job shortages that your policies created, delivering 20,000 new university places, establishing 10 days paid family and domestic violence leave. He convened a job and skills summit. He established a Jobs and Skills Australia. In fact, the question you could almost ask is, what is it that Prime Minister Albanese hasn't done to help the Australian people? He hasn't, and I can go on.
Minister Farrell, your time has expired. Senator Cadell, first supplementary.
The same parents of these children are now facing an average of 9.2% price rises in staples like bread, fruit, vegetables and dairy. After just 10 months, what specific relief has the government delivered to those New South Wales families struggling to buy those basics to put on the table to feed those children?
Thank you, Senator Cadell. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Cadell, for his question. Well, you obviously weren't listening to my previous answer, because I listed 10 or more things that the Albanese government is doing to put downward pressure on the cost of living. Nobody understands. With a background like his, nobody understands cost of living pressures more than our Prime Minister. Yes, seriously. Yep, seriously. He understands the cost of living pressures on ordinary Australians. But what could you have done? What could you have done in these 10 months that might have helped the parents of these children push down something like electricity prices? You could have voted for the cap on gas prices.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. The time for answering has expired. Senator Cadell, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Under your government, New South Wales families have also experienced 10 interest rate rises, meaning most families are now paying an extra $1,400 per month in interest. no $275 energy bill cut, at least 9.2% in the price of staples, and 10 interest rate rises. Is that this government's idea of a good 10 months for Australia?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Goodell, for his question. And it's interesting you're focusing all of your questions about New South Wales. Well, maybe that's because there's an election on in New South Wales this coming Saturday, and your candidates who represent your
please resume your seat. Order on my left. Senator Cash. I had to call the minister about 4 times because it was so noisy in here he couldn't hear. Minister Farrell, please continue. Please continue.
I'm waiting for the direction to come and stand, in which I'm doing right now. Plus, I was getting a little bit of advice from my colleagues behind me. So, well, I can't think of everything, President. You know, I need.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Hanson.
I want relevance to the question because I want to hear an answer. I don't want to hear waffling on about the New South Wales state election, which has got nothing to do with the question.
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Order. There are a lot of interjections across the chamber, including direct interjections to the minister. Please continue, Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Well, I'll go through them. Cheaper childcare, cheaper medicines, 180,000 fee-free TAFE places, 20,000 new university places, 10 days paid family and domestic leave. We convened a Jobs and Skills
Thank you, Minister.
Summit.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Thorpe.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Indigenous Australians. A recent FOI exposed a dirty secret report to the National Indigenous Australians Agency that concluded traditional owners in the Beetaloo Basin won't benefit economically, socially or culturally from fracking their country. It also stated that the traditional owners are at a clear disadvantage when negotiating with gas giants. How do you justify fracking the Beetaloo after these revelations?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Thorpe for the question. I understand Senator Thorpe's question relates to the report commissioned by the NIAA on Beetaloo, which was done under the previous government. The NIAA commissioned the Blueprint for Indigenous Benefits Realisation, the Beetaloo Region Report in 2020, done by external consultants who prepared the report. It doesn't constitute legal advice or represent the government's position. We absolutely acknowledge First Nations people's connection to country is central to their spiritual, cultural, physical and economic well-being, and that native title recognises First Nations people's pre-existing land and water rights and interests. We also recognise the importance of thorough consultation with First Nations people with the cultural authority to speak for country, in line with the principles of free, prior and informed consent. Land councils have those statutory responsibilities under law to consult with traditional owners and native title holders regarding activities on their traditional land, and we are also taking action to ensure the voices of First Nations people are heard and listened to, of course, as we are through the Voice to Parliament. Specifically in relation to the Beetaloo Basin, the Northern Land Council has statutory responsibilities under law to consult the traditional owners and native title holders regarding the activities on their traditional land, and we are committed to working with them. And this includes support via the Australian Government and those ongoing discussions.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Thorpe, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Given the clear disadvantage of traditional owners when negotiating with these dirty gas giants and their almost unanimous opposition to fracking, no free, prior and informed consent, I beg your pardon, will you withhold any fracking in the Beetaloo until and unless genuine consent has been obtained? If you have free, prior and informed consent, show us.
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I think the issues of the Beetaloo Basin really fall under the responsibilities of the Northern Territory government through the arrangements they have and through the responsibilities they have, via the territory laws. But I think the federal government remains open to working with any community on any issue where there are concerns, and if those, if the standard processes that have been put in place aren't working, then of course the government would stand ready and able and willing to engage with them on any issue that they seek to raise.
Senator O'Neill. Oh, sorry, Senator Thorpe. Second supplementary.
Thanks, President. Thanks, Minister, for your answers. So what this comes down to is whether the government stands with First Nations people or with gas companies that fund your party. So whose side are you on?
Minister Gallagher. Senator Thorpe, you've asked your question. Minister.
Thank you. Well, the Commonwealth has specific responsibilities in relation to approvals for particular projects. I know this one has been controversial. And I would just urge those that do have concerns, and if Senator Thorpe has people that don't feel that they are being spoken for or are able to have their voice heard, then I would encourage her to encourage them to come forward, and to also, the Commonwealth remains committed to be working in partnership with land councils, First Nations communities and the Northern Territory government to sort through any of the concerns that may exist. But ultimately, the Commonwealth has specific and set responsibilities in this area.
Thank you, Minister. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Industry and Science, Senator Farrell. What are the government's plans to build a strong and growing manufacturing industry in Australia?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator O'Neill for her very deep interest in this area and, of course, her interest in ensuring a new Labor government in New South Wales this coming weekend. Australia must be a country that makes things, President. The $115 billion National Reconstruction Fund is a key platform to support, diversify and transform Australian industry. The NRF will target projects and investments that help Australia capture new, high-value market opportunities. This will help our businesses grow and succeed, both in the economy of today and of tomorrow. The NRF will provide finance to grow advanced manufacturing and support businesses to innovate and to move up the technological ladder. But it also supports our national sovereign capability. In the early days of the pandemic, people were shocked that Australia couldn't make enough masks or PPEs for our population. It showed the vulnerability of being the last link in the global supply chain. But the National Reconstruction Fund is about more than helping us produce things at short notice in times of crisis. It's about building a more resilient and more diversified economy with more jobs in regional Australia. At the very heart of the National Reconstruction Fund is an ironclad belief in the capability of Australian know-how. The Albanese government is committed to diversifying our industrial base, and the National Reconstruction Fund is the key to unlocking Australia's potential. And I call on all senators in this chamber to support the National Reconstruction Fund.
Senator O'Neill, first supplementary.
Thank you, Senator Farrell. My second question to you today is, why is a vibrant Australian manufacturing industry important, And what challenges does the Australian industry face?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator O'Neill again for her question. Manufacturing does matter because it creates sustainable, secure, well-paying jobs. Jobs from coders, welders, designers, researchers, process workers and everything in between. Jobs in regional Australia and our outer suburbs. For too long, the Australian manufacturing industry has been the subject to the threat of political games by the opposition. The NRF will be independently run on a commercial basis with decisions taken in the national interest, not marginal seat politics. No colour-coded spreadsheets here. Again, I call on all senators in the chamber to realise this opportunity to support Australian manufacturing and support the National Reconstruction Fund.
Thank you, Minister. Senator O'Neill, second supplementary.
Thank you, Senator Farrell, and I appreciate your good wishes for the people of New South Wales on the weekend. What are the international market opportunities that will help our industry grow, and what threats are there to that bright future?
Minister Farrell. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and again thank Senator O'Neill for her question. We are supporting manufacturing through the NRF, but also by creating new international market opportunities for high-quality Australian products. The Albanese Labor government is opening up new and diversified markets for Australian goods in countries like India. On my recent visit to India with the Prime Minister, we were accompanied by the President of Australian-based hearing device manufacturer Cochlear. They are working hard to expand their distribution networks in India, so more Indian people have access to this incredible Australian innovation, which creates more jobs both here and at home. For too long, our exports have been concentrated in a single market. Under our trade diversification plan, more Australian-made products will be enjoyed around the world, including in India.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. The time for answering has expired. Senator Brockman.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. I refer to the confronting revelations exposed through a recent Four Corners expose on Perth Mint, which unearthed alleged gold doping, money laundering and a complete breakdown of compliance and reporting requirements. I also note AUSTRAC's investigation into the Perth Mint, the London bullion market incident review process that's underway, and revelations around the US state model commodity code coming to light. Importantly, comments from your Treasurer, who described these revelations as, and I quote, incredibly concerning and very troubling. Noting the West Australian opposition is calling for a Royal Commission, what is the response of the Albanese government?
Thank you, Senator Brockman. Minister Gallagher.
The one where there's more gnats than libs.
Thank you. Thank you, and I thank Senator Brockman for the question. Matters relating to the Perth Mint's operations are a matter for the Perth Mint and the Western Australian Government as its owner. The federal government— well, hang on a second,
Order.
Senator Scarr. I know you like to answer my questions before I get the opportunity. Hang on. Put your seatbelt on for a second. The federal government takes compliance matters very seriously, and AUSTRAC ordered audit of the Gold Corporation, which trades as the Perth Mint, assessing compliance with anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism finances laws, is due to report in May 2023. They are the responsibilities of the federal government. They are in place. That is the position of the Albanese government. This is largely a matter calls for a royal commission by the opposition in WA should be matters that the WA Parliament deals with, and the suitable response should be there. But we are satisfied with the work that is underway via AUSTRAC, doing their assessment, which is due to report to the government, or due to release its report in May 2023.
Thank you, Minister Gallagher. Senator Brockman, first supplementary.
The Perth Mint is a $21.8 billion business trading with customers in more than 130 countries. with a conflicted WA Premier refusing to instigate a Royal Commission through fear of what will be exposed, will the Albanese government take action, engage with Premier McGowan over the need for a Royal Commission into Goldcorp and Perth Mint to retain the confidence of our trading partners and the Australian public?
Thank you, Senator Brockman. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I don't agree with the sort of implied insinuations in Senator Brockman's question. It was a pretty long preamble. It was a long preamble there. The Western Australian Premier, Mr McGowan, has made it clear that the government is aware of these matters and that there is presently an audit underway, and that the Mint is also investing heavily in anti-criminal behaviour and compliance measures. As to whether there's a political dispute or that the opposition in WA is running, that you are running by proxy through this chamber, Senator Brockman, I think that's largely a matter for the Western Australian Parliament. And if you want to have a say in that, maybe you should stand over there and have a say in the Parliament. They might need a couple of extra bodies over there, considering. But that is why, I mean, on the matter of substance, that is why there is an AUSTRAC investigation underway due to report in May.
Minister,
it is serious. It's been handled.
Senator Brockman, second supplementary.
I will remind the minister that the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Act is a Commonwealth Act. Has the government had any conversations with the Premier to urge him to take action over this important issue regarding the reputation of Australia in the international marketplace? And if the Premier won't act, will the Albanese government?
Thank you, Senator Brockman. Minister Gallagher.
Well, based on the information or the answers I've given you to the previous two questions, both governments are acting. There is an audit underway. There's an assessment underway by AUSTRAC, which is appropriate, and a report to be provided in May. I mean, I don't know how much faster you can be in assessing the concerns that have been raised, the serious concerns that have been raised around the Perth Mint. And AUSTRACs have, with their responsibilities to assess compliance with anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing laws, which is something I did respond to in the first question, that is their responsibility. So the Commonwealth, through its agencies, is responding to the areas that it has responsibility for, and the report will be provided in May, which is 2 months away. And I think that is pretty swift response. As to conversations between governments, I have no doubt there have been some.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Sheldon.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Watt. Over the last week, remote communities in my home state and of your home state of Queensland have had devastating flooding. Can the Minister please advise what the Albanese government is doing to support these communities?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thanks again, Senator Sheldon, for your ongoing work when it comes to disaster recovery. On Friday last week, I travelled to Normanton and Burketown, Gulf of Carpentaria communities, and was able to meet with locals and see the devastating flooding that those communities have experienced firsthand. I want to thank and acknowledge the member for Kennedy, Mr Bob Katter, for his advocacy and for joining me as we toured some of the areas of highest impact, and I also thank Senator Green for her ongoing advocacy for these communities, both to the federal and state government. I also want to thank the mayors of Carpentaria and Berkshires, Jack Bowden and Ernie Camp, as well as other members of the Berkshire Council who gave me a tour of some of the damage in the community. In addition, I'll be meeting Mr Camp and the Mayor of Doomadgee Council, Mr Jason Ned, while they're in Canberra this week. On the same day that I visited these communities, we made the Australian Government Disaster Recovery Payment available to residents in the Queensland local government areas of Boulia, Burke and Mount Isa. This is the one-off payment of $1,000 per eligible adult and $400 per eligible child who have suffered a significant loss as a result of the floods, including a severely damaged or destroyed home or a serious injury. Don't worry, Senator McDonald, we'll come to you. We also activated the Disaster Recovery Allowance for the same areas and extended it to the local government areas of Carpentaria, Cloncurry, Doomadgee and Mornington. And this is in recognition of the fact that this event has caused significant disruption to people's livelihoods. The Disaster Recovery Allowance provides up to 13 weeks of federal income support to assist people who experience a loss of income as a direct result of a major disaster, such as being cut off from being able to get to their workplace or from the business that they operate. And there are many such people in our Gulf communities right now. I can inform the House that as of midnight on Monday this week, 1,300 people have received nearly $1 million in payments since claims opened just on Friday last week, and that of course followed other support that began within 24 hours of the flood peak.
Thank you, Senator Watt. The time for answering has expired. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for those actions in this very important time. What is the Albanese government doing to ensure that Australians are better prepared for the more intense and more frequent natural disasters we'll be facing due to climate change?
Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Sheldon. And as we have now demonstrated on numerous occasions in all parts of this country, no matter what state or territory you live in, no matter whether you live in a safe or a marginal seat, and no matter who represents you in parliament, when a disaster strikes somewhere in Australia, the Albanese government will stand by your side. That's why we always move quickly to offer immediate assistance, whether that be financial or logistical, in conjunction with state and territory governments, as well as with the ADF. We don't pick fights with state governments, and they continue to do that even in opposition. We just get on with the job, cooperating with people, regardless of their political colour, to deliver the support that's needed. And in addition to that immediate help, the Albanese Labor government is also working proactively to fix the failure to prepare that we witnessed over the past decade. And I have noticed Senator McDonald complaining last night and in the media about the exposure that remote communities have to disasters. What a shame she didn't do a single thing about that in any of the years she was in government. We've got on with the job. We're creating a disaster-ready fund and we're keeping communities resilient.
Senator Sheldon, second supplementary.
Minister, are there any threats to the Albanese government's work to better prepare Australians for natural disasters?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. The fact is that for nearly a decade, the Coalition failed to make our country more resilient to the impacts of natural disasters, mainly because they didn't believe in climate change. Not only did they not spend a single dollar of their emergency response fund, which was designed to specifically invest in disaster resilience, they also failed to guarantee the ongoing funding of our national disaster agencies beyond the July 1st this year. This is another one of these temporary measures that Senator Gallagher is having to work her way through in the budget, funding that was running out on the 30th of June this year, and that included the natural disaster management agencies of the federal government. If the Coalition had won the election, our national natural disaster agencies would have run out of money on the 30th of June this year. And as things currently stand, the new National Emergency Management Agency requires an injection of new funding simply to continue operating. These are the kind of economic vandals these people were, putting communities at risk, and we're going to change it.
Has expired. Minister Farrell.
After that terrific answer, President, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Senator Brockman.
Something with you before you potentially leave the chair,